What's going on, y'all? For previous iterations of this series, we've had Magic the Gathering players on here. We have our first Hearthstone player on here, and I gotta say, I'm a little worried because he's really, really good at games. It's No Hands Gamer, Hearthstone Grandmaster, guy who got his dad to legend, extremely, extremely analytically minded, like a guy I was really afraid of when I was coming up with the cards I wanted to ask about here. So, like, I do know that he has seen basically no Marvel Snap ever. So we're gonna go over the game first, just give him all the information that he may or may not actually need, and we'll start from there. No Hands, do you have anything you want to say before we get into it?
Yeah, I'm coming in blind, so I
Yes.
know that there's cards and
Yeah.
that there's a double cube. That's all.
Yeah.
That's all I really know. I don't know how you win. I don't know what the point is. I
Okay.
don't know what makes a good card or not.
Okay. So the way you win a game of Marvel Snap, it's a game with 3 locations. Each of the locations has like an ability, right? It's like a space on a game board. And you can
Okay.
put up to 4 cards at each of those locations. And as you can see,
Okay.
we're looking at a card right now that's Misty Knight.
Okay.
That orange over there, that's how strong she is. She has 2 power. So she
So just
costs 1.
okay. So the more power, the better. The less cost, the better. That's
Yeah,
probably
exactly. Yeah,
pretty.
that
Okay.
okay. And then from there, you have there are 6 turns in a game of Marvel Snap. You get 1 energy each turn. Energy is mana. It's the same thing. But on turn 6, the game automatically ends, and the person winning 2 out of 3 locations wins the game. So you're looking for points at 2 out of 3 locations. And your
Okay.
cards are going to be pretty easy to understand, right? So I put together a group of the vanilla cards so you could get a sense for like just a general power scale here. We have
Okay.
Misty Knight 1, 2.
Okay.
We have Shocker 2, 3. These are all the cards with no abilities, they're just stats.
Oh, okay, okay. Like
These are
equivalent
the
of like a 2-3
yeah.
in Hearthstone kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah, this is a 3, 4. It's Cyclops. The
Okay.
Thing is a 4, 6, does nothing.
Okay.
Abomination at 5, 9, and the Hulk at 6, 12.
And what's like the point of having more power? Like power. I mean, you could get the impression more power good, but how does power actually win you the game
You
on
have
these
the
cards?
most points at a location. So
Oh, so you just
literally,
want as many. Okay. You
yeah,
just put.
literally you
Okay.
just put like the Hulk is 6, 12. Your opponent has 9 power there. You play the Hulk there, you win the
Mm.
location. Again, you're trying to win 2 out of 3
Oh.
locations by just having the most points there.
So there's probably a big advantage of having just figuring out ways to have slightly more than your opponent, and not
Yeah.
over investing in one location. Is that
Yes.
the
Winning by 1 is the same as winning by 50. Yes.
okay? Okay,
Yeah.
it's okay.
It's
Gotcha.
like if you wanted to put it in Hearthstone terms, you could say it's almost like value trading, right?
Yeah,
It
that
like
makes sense. Yep.
that's like the less you invest and still win, the more you can invest other places in order to win those. So yeah, like there is definitely that aspect there. You
Yep.
start with 3 cards in your hand, and then you
Okay.
draw one on turns 1 through 6. So over the course of the game, you will see 9 out of the 12 cards in your deck. There are only 12 cards in your deck, one
Oh
copy
wow, that's
each.
very.
It's
Okay.
one
How do
copy
you even?
each, so it's like it's kind of the
Okay.
same ratio, right?
Okay.
So if you want to put the Hulk in your deck, you put the Hulk in your deck. That's it. It's just 12 cards. So you see 9 out of
But
12 in most
so
games.
there's four spots on each locations, but
Hmm.
so at the end of the game there can be like 3 on 1, 4 on like you could
Yeah,
have 4 on 1, 4 on 1, and 1 on another kind of thing. So
absolutely. I see
okay.
your brain is already working. You're thinking about that like, all right, I'm going to put a bunch of cards someplace and then I'm going to play the Hulk
Yeah.
on the other one.
Yeah.
I can see where you're
Well,
going there. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it seems like there's probably a lot of game theory around diversifying your strategy and what your opponent does. And I know I do know it's like live where it's both players play at the
Correct.
same time, right? So
Correct.
I forgot
Simultaneous
about that.
turns.
Yeah.
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 Simultaneous turns. And I think that pretty much covers everything that you
Okay.
need to know to get started. If
Okay.
you have further questions, I can answer them unless they give away information about the metagame. I am
Okay.
fairly confident that because of what you've already said, I'm already like, oh, okay, he's gonna get me. Like,
Okay. 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 Yeah.
I'm a little worried. I put together some pretty difficult ones for you. I put together a whole deck just for you.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
there are no, I didn't design any like specific traps into this one. I
Okay.
just put together a bunch of cards that I think are really interesting to ask you about.
Okay.
So we started out talking about those vanilla cards with no abilities. This
Okay.
is a card called Patriot. It has an ongoing ability, which is just, it's a perpetual ability. There's really two types of abilities
Okay.
in Marvel Snap. There's like ETBs and ongoings. Like they happen when they either are revealed or they happen perpetually. So this is just
Mm-hmm.
perpetually your cards with no abilities have +2 power. Unless this card gets like disrupted somehow, but like it just says
Mm-hmm.
+2 power to all your cards with no abilities. You just saw a bunch of cards with no abilities. This is a card that goes
Yeah.
with those cards. So, not all the cards that I show you are going to be like, amazing top tier or incredibly low tier. And
Yeah.
honestly, I'm really just interested in your thought processes around it.
Okay.
But that is not something that necessarily applies to this card. So, this is
Okay.
Patriot, 3 cost, 1 power, +2 power to all your cards that don't have abilities.
So you just want me to like guess what I think like the power level of this card would kind of be?
Yeah. Just tell me what you think about it and why you think
Okay.
that it is.
My guess is I bet this is a really good card in a free to play deck kind of thing. But just dies off when because I'm guessing if it's anything like Hearthstone, after a while vanilla stats get really boring, and then every card has something with abilities on it. So probably there's some free to play deck that runs this card and a bunch of no stats. That's my guess. But it won't actually be good enough. At a competitive level because it's just hard for me to think that this card and just a bunch of no stat things would be balanced as a if it was overpowered. I feel like something like that would get nerfed because they wouldn't want because something that's so simple to be so good. So that's just my guess on that card. Um, and let's see it. And but it also I think the three mana for 1 power that's also 3 less than other powers. So you're I don't know. I mean, I guess if you have so like the 3/4 is the kind of the base it sounded like for a
Yeah.
3. So you're -2, like 1.5. So you'd have to have at least 2 no stat, no ability minions for it to be a net profit overall. I guess what you could do is like have something and then play it down but I'm guessing this isn't very good
So,
overall. Um
I think you're correct in your thought process, which is to say, Patriot plus those no ability cards, that is exactly a new player deck. It's not very good. It's very much just like, okay, this is pretty mediocre. Where Patriot
yeah.
actually shines is in the context of cards that like put tokens on the board, basically. This is like a silver hand type guy.
Oh.
It'll buff the tokens, right?
Oh,
So
okay. I didn't
this
I didn't
is
know
a
there
bit
was
like,
tokens. I thought you just had
yeah,
the 9 cards in your deck.
no, no,
Okay.
no, no. Yeah, yeah. You. There are cards that like effectively put tokens on the board. I'm using an analogy here.
Okay.
Like for example, there's like a 6 drop that fills up the rest of your board with ones, and those ones get the
Okay.
buff from Patriot, and that is
Ah, I
usually the
gotcha.
context in which he's played. I think with the
Okay.
knowledge that you had going in, that is the smartest thing you could have done though. Like your analysis is like, all
Okay.
right, I don't know these cards exist, so I'm just this is your that is the correct
Yeah.
analysis of Patriot outside of the specific context of the cards that do things that are like overwhelmingly large amounts of cards that happen to get buffed by Patriot.
Okay. I'm also not sure how like do things get killed, like
Not
it
really.
doesn't sound like so it's a thing of I mean I don't know if you get the token space, does that mean you not have the space for other things? So
It does
um
mean that. Like that is one of the
okay.
downsides of playing a
That
strategy
I don't
like
know.
that.
Yeah, so I mean these are things that like it's hard for me to have a strong opinion on like how board
Yeah,
space affects
exactly.
that's something you have to have a real feel. But that was kind of my, usually vanilla stat cards are bad because they're balanced to be bad because maybe they're good in the initial phases of a game like the first year of Marvel Snap, but it seems like so that was just my guess, yeah.
No,
Okay,
I think you
interesting.
were exactly correct because like you saw the vanilla stat cards and you're like, if I just played these, no matter how strong they are, it's still bad. The abilities that I would
Hmm.
be able to get are likely to be better otherwise, and that is
Yeah.
absolutely true. Nobody is playing Patriot with Cyclops or whatever. That is 100% correct.
Okay.
Now, Marvel Snap, there's
Okay.
not a lot of removal. I will say this: there is not a lot of removal in Marvel Snap, and they are pretty cautious on introducing it. So I'll say that as well. This is Lady Deathstrike. She costs 5, she has 4 power, but she destroys each card here that has less power.
So you're getting more and more power as you go throughout the game, right? So it's
Right.
kind of like
The
turn 5, you'd have 5 power. So you could play just this card and this card alone. Is that right?
you get turn 5 you have 5 energy, right? Like
Oh,
you
5
get 1
energy. Okay.
energy each turn, yeah. So like by turn 6 you have 6 energy. There's 21 energy in a normal game of Marvel Snap.
Okay. So do you get this? Do you keep your energy from the previous turn if you don't use it all?
No, there's no
Okay.
banking
Okay.
system or anything like that. There's no
So
Runeterra
and you'd
style
only.
spell mana.
I mean, this seems like if you make it to turn 5, you could completely swing the board state, right? Like, your opponent has a bunch of low cost stuff. You play this, and then they don't have that low cost stuff, and then all of a sudden you're ahead on a bunch of spots. Um,
Reminder
that
though,
seems.
contextually here, it only destroys the card because I don't think you might not know what the word here means in the context of a Marvel Snap card. Here
Uh
refers
huh.
to only at the location that she's played. She's not board
Okay.
wiping them. It's just one location out of the 3.
Okay. Yeah. So, but still, it's like by turn 5, probably there'd be a lot of less power. I mean, even that 3-1 is even though it costs 3 mana, like it was 1 power, so you could
Correct.
get rid of that you could get rid of any tokens. It
Correct.
sounds like there's might be a lot of low cost stuff. So I mean, if you're saying when there's not a lot of something, so I know in Hearthstone, like now there's an incredibly high amount of a single target removal, but there used to not be. So it was more valuable in the past. So if they're designing the game in a way there's not a lot of it, that means these cards go like really high in value. So my guess is this is really strong. Just because like you could destroy all the tokens on a board, and there's 3 different locations, so like it's very likely somebody has one location that uh they have a low board state, right? So, or like a lot of low mana cards, and then or even if they don't, they have to play around this card if they know you have it in your deck. So even there's value there of like forcing your opponent to play around a card. So I mean, my guess is this card is insane.
Ooh.
Yeah, so that's my guess, but I haven't seen the
Okay.
level, especially if you say there's not a lot of removal in
Correct.
general. So yeah.
Well, I think I can categorically say this card is not insane. Lady Deathstrike,
Okay.
not
Okay.
insane. Definitely not insane.
Okay.
You're right
Wrong
about the
there. All right.
analysis of the dynamics, which is to say, Lady Deathstrike is one of the very few true removal spells in Marvel Snap, in as much as there are any
Okay.
removal spells. There just aren't a lot of them. There are about
Yeah.
probably 5 cards that you could reasonably count as removal spells, and then some conditional ones, right? And
Okay.
the issue with Lady Deathstrike, though, is if you remember Abomination that I showed you, like the vanilla stats for a 5 are like 9. You get like 9, she's 4.
Oh.
And so it's
Okay.
like when I say they very highly balance this stuff, that's what I mean. Like if this card ever gets like a
Okay.
1 power buff or a 2 power buff or something, it would probably be ridiculously broken.
Okay.
She is like
I
kept
was thinking,
exactly.
yeah.
Go on.
Don't they have like small wins from turns 1 through 4 on the board though?
Yeah, they
So you'd have
absolutely
like
do.
so that could be good to like you do a 1, 2, 3, and maybe you have like
Yes.
3. So I mean, I guess it's probably you're saying it's like balanced for this, but yeah, I just know in general.
Yes. Yeah, no,
So
it's like specifically balanced for that use case being there, but
okay,
not being OP. Like
okay,
they released her
okay.
as a 5/3. They were actually really scared of her. She came out with
Ah, I
1 less
gotcha.
power. And so like they gave her 1 extra power recently, and it hasn't made a ton of difference. The times that she mostly sees plays is when there's something like, an early game card that scales late that she can
Okay.
blow up. So like we had a metagame
Ah,
where there was
okay.
like a scaling tutu basically, and
Mm-hmm.
that was like a big metagame for her. But outside of
Okay.
those metagames, she's very rarely seeing play, and even in those metagames, she sees
Okay.
play specifically in like her destroy little archetype type deck.
So removal is more of like a tech card kind of thing, where it's like it's
Exactly.
good in these fringe situations, but it's not just good overall. I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yes, like it needs to be fairly aggressively costed or getting you a ton of value by removing something that really really matters, right? And so
Okay.
she is right on that borderline where I think that if they changed one of the numbers on her card beneficially, she would be exactly the card you're talking about. but they've been
Yeah,
very, very strict with her in terms of making sure that she's not that.
that makes sense. Okay, gotcha. Minus
This is the
three.
hood. Yeah, he's a 1-3, but ETB. So as soon like on reveal, whenever he flips face up, he adds a demon to your hand. And I say flip face up, like that's
What
sort
is
of
it?
how Marvel Snap worked. It doesn't actually. There's no
Oh,
actual mechanic there. Like when you play a card, it's face down because we're playing simultaneous
okay.
turns, and then the card gets flipped face up on
Oh,
reveal.
that's interesting. I always wondered because that was something I was kind of thinking of like, okay, both players are playing simultaneously. Like there'd be a lot of like, oh, yeah, I'm putting all these cards here, so I switch them there.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
they don't see
Yeah.
your cards as they come out. Like you don't. There's no benefit. The cards are played face down simultaneously. I actually, now that you mentioned, I don't know why they do that. Like I don't know why there's a
Mhm.
face down thing at all. I think it's just to facilitate the existence of an on reveal mechanic. But
Okay.
like I think that's just like so they could have their version of ET enters the battlefield effects or like when you play this effects. But like
Could
it
you
doesn't
see your
actually
opponent
matter.
put something in the face down on the left
No, you
or
don't
on the
see it.
middle? Oh,
You
see,
don't see it
okay.
come down.
Okay. So, okay. Okay.
That's why I'm saying like I don't actually know what the point of them being face down is. I think it's just because they have on reveal and they just wanted it to feel like a real card game. Maybe I don't
Okay.
really know. Anyway, the demon you get though is a 1/6, extremely overstated unit at the cost of an understated one.
Okay. So it's a net three.
Mm-hmm.
So one, if you have another way to remove your 1/3, I don't know much about like how that works. If you can like if you have some other card that says like sacrifice sacrifice a minion whatever, then this card becomes insane, right? Because if you can sacrifice it, then you can actually make the negative into a positive, and then the positive the is even huge. So I don't know if those kind of mechanics are in. I also don't know. It also could be bad
I
if
will tell you, I just showed you Lady Deathstrike. She kills your
yeah.
stuff too, and that would include this.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I mean, there'd have to be some sort of synergy. I mean, also game theory. This could be really bad if your opponent just removes your 1/6 and then leaves your one like because -3 is terrible, right?
Correct.
So, um, so it really depends on, how easy it is to remove this and and the benefit you get because you might, if there's some card that says sacrifice a card, gain some token, which are tons of cards like that in Hearthstone and Magic. I'm guessing of you sacrifice a card or whatever, then you could sacrifice a card that's hurting you and get a positive. So that's my guess. I don't know how many of those kind of cards there are and how convenient they are. Um, but I mean the theory of that is pretty straightforward. So
Yeah, 100% correct.
okay.
Absolutely knocked it out of the park. That is exactly
Mhm.
what you do with this guy. There are two main ways that you play with him. One is with those cards that sacrifice, and the other is with cards that send him back to your hand. So you play him again, you get another
Oh,
demon,
okay.
and then you get rid of him
Oh yeah.
entirely.
Oh,
Like
that's
that's exactly
broken.
what you
Yeah.
do. Yeah, that's
Okay.
exactly
Yeah.
what you do. He is a core card in, I would argue, like basically in Marvel Snap, one of the things that happens a lot is there's like shells that get tweaked because there's no like hero classes or whatever in Hearthstone. There's no mana types like there are in Magic. You
Yeah.
can just play whatever you want in whatever deck you want. And so that
Okay.
ends up being like similar shells end up being sort of the backbone of a bunch of different decks that build off of them. The Hood is part of one of those shells with those bounce cards. He's a core card in like those destroy decks that are using him as a like sacrificial pawn and then also getting that Hood demon, that 1/6 out of there. So you
Mhm.
absolutely correct on the dynamics of this card and on the specifics of this card. You 100% exactly.
Okay, so yeah, yeah. All right. Well,
Yeah, you did great.
feels good to
That
be
was
right. All right.
a
Yeah.
100%, 100%. Next up, ramp. I know Hearthstone players and ramp.
Mm,
One of the things I thought about was with Hearthstone players, like, all right, you guys are probably pretty aware of the power of adding energy to what you can do. That said, in Marvel Snap, there's no similar sense of inevitability, right? When you have that energy, you only have it until the game ends. It's not like you can do like the druid thing and have 10 energy when your opponent has 5 and then just exploit that until the game ends, right? Like you don't choose when the game ends. You have a limited amount of time with which to make use of this energy boost,
okay.
right?
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
this is Electro, 3 cost, 2 power, on reveal +1 max energy. but you can only play one card a turn.
Um, so one, this is understated. Two, you can't like you're not ramping till turn 3.
Hmm.
So really 4 or 5, like you've 6, you get one more. So it can be good probably if there's like a really broken 5 mana card, uh, you want to get to. Um, that's kind of my guess, but I don't know. Like, I mean, I feel like my guess is a lot of games end before then. I don't know. It seems, and then it's understated by quite. The 3/4 was the vanilla stats, right? So,
Correct.
um, I don't know how much. Seems like you don't have that much mana, so I'm not sure how much the opportunity cost is of a deck, being able to play only one card per turn. Um, but yeah, my biggest guess is like there's a really broken 5 mana or 6 mana card you want to get to. Like that's the kind of deck that would run this card. But like that's why you would do it. So the more there's something broken that's 5 or 6 mana, but like I don't feel like this would just be like an auto put in a deck. It'd have to be, but yeah, if there's a really broken, like I said, 5 and 6 mana card. I bet the sees play. So
That is exactly correct. You identified not only the cases in which the C's play, but also why those decks aren't particularly good. Like that is exactly 100% correct. Electro is there to facilitate usually because first of all, I want to say games only end on turn 6. There's not like I mean like you can retreat, you can leave early if you're like super far
hmm
behind before your
okay,
opponent snaps and the cube doubling. You understand the cube doubling mechanic, right? Like it doubles on turn 6 and you can also snap to double it previously and that
oh,
that's like it's not like you're
interesting.
ending a game before this guy happens, right? Like I mean you
Okay,
can but like only if your opponent chooses to leave because you presented a dominant position, right? And
okay,
so you're correct about Electro though, right? Because I think the snap stuff is almost like it sounds weird, but one thing I've learned through doing this is like the cube doubling mechanic, which is of course called snapping in Marvel Snap, is not
hmm
actually something that seems to impact a lot of card evaluation at all. Like the it's
oh,
almost like an or like it's almost like a skill that's like slightly separate, which is something I would mention here. Like
okay,
it's like a skill that is attached to the game, but the core of
hmm
the game is still like a card game type thing. And
okay,
just it's one of the things that like when you play Snap and then you go back to another game, you end up thinking like, oh my god, I wish I could Snap here. I wish I could double the stakes because it's just such a
yeah,
nice mechanic to have. But it's almost a little bit like orthogonal to
okay,
how card evaluation works. That said, 100% correct on Electro. He is only ever seen play in decks where there is a really broken 6 drop or a really broken combination of 6 drops. So, like the
okay,
traditional Electro deck is like you play Electro and then a card that like doubles the effectiveness of your dumb 6 drop and then your dumb 6 drop, right? Like that's like how Electro decks tend to work.
okay,
And that is exactly correct. They have almost never been the best deck in the game, but they
okay,
have existed throughout the game's history because of the appeal of just doing something big. People love doing
yeah,
something big. And they've very rarely been like super elite. I would say in very few cases have Electro decks been super elite, and usually in the cases where they are, the 6 drop in question has received a balance change in the future.
okay.
But currently speaking, I would say that is an exactly correct analysis of Electro. Like absolutely knocked it out of the park.
Nice. I'm curious about the snapping.
Sure,
So
tell
I
me
know
about
in
it.
backgammon, like when you double the stakes, your opponent either can concede or accept, and acceptance it
Yes.
twice. Or is that how it works? Or it
Yep.
sounded like you could just okay.
You can
You
leave
snap
whenever.
and then. What if I snap?
Yes.
Do I have the option to leave before the stakes are doubled, or is it just now the
Yes.
stakes are doubled?
No, no. You have the option to leave at any time unless you
Okay.
are the person who snapped. If you snapped,
Yeah.
you can only leave if they snap back. Because then,
Okay.
then
Yep.
it's like, oh, the stakes are doubled again, and I have to leave.
Yep.
But like that is really like the weird thing about the snap mechanic is it's a weirdly natural fit in a card game that nobody had ever seemed to do before, and
Yeah.
it's like it almost doesn't impact card designer evaluation at all, but at the same
hmm
time it impacts the entire game. Like there are some cards
Yeah.
where it's like the fact that this is hidden information is useful in the context of a snap, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the only times it really impacts your evaluation. For the most part, just the strong stuff is strong stuff, though.
Okay. But yeah, I know in backgammon, this the doubling means getting a win to like a 75% chance to win becomes
Yeah.
very valuable because that's when it's like uh, you going up, going from 75% to 90% might not be as valuable because once you snap, that doesn't actually they're gonna concede or both times kind of thing. So the
Yes.
actual expected value isn't that much different. So you might do plays. It changes the mathematics behind how you play. Uh, so even if you snapped, uh, and your opponent controls the snap, so you can't snap back, that might change the game theory of how you play because now you might want to get a 90% for before you just need to get to the 75%. So there's a lot of math, like hidden weird unintuitive math in that kind of gameplay. So
I
yeah.
think that is true, and also I think as someone with experience in backgammon, you're likely better at it than like 99% of the people playing Snap, even though you've never played the game. But like you're exactly like that's exactly true because there are a lot of situations where sometimes it's like, okay, if I make this play, are they going to leave? Like,
Yeah.
if I make
Yeah.
this play, are they going to leave? If I snap right now, are they out of here? So there's a lot of situations where it's like, if I snap, I think they're leaving, so I need to not snap and make a play that'll let them stay in. And it's one of it like
Mhm.
it balancing that is a little bit tough to do, especially it's even harder on stream where you have to like
Um,
because like half of what you're doing is content. It's like, all right, if I snap here,
oh,
I'm losing the
yeah.
content. I'm not
That actually is a really subtle because I know in Hearthstone sometimes there's kind of the players that are the efficiency players in Hearthstone where they want to get to the win as fast as possible and as efficiently as
Mhm.
possible. And I'm one of those players when I'm ahead, I want my opponent to enjoy it and watch my opponent struggle and suffer as I completely destroy them. So the idea, of doubling and ending it, kind of takes
Yeah.
away some of that fun, right? Because you want that
Yes.
feeling of like I am so much more powerful than you, and you're like at a 2% chance to win, but you have to hang in there, So,
Well, there is a
yeah.
deck. There is a deck for you in this game. I'll tell you that much. There is definitely a deck for you in this game. I'll tell you at the end of it, but like because it's
Okay.
not going to be on the list. But I'll tell you at the end. I'll tell you at the end what the deck is. Okay, this is Arnhem Zola, 6 cost, 0 power. But when it comes into the battlefield, we're just going to use that terminology for on reveal here. It destroys a random friendly card and then puts it on the other location. So it turns 1 card into 2 cards and sends them elsewhere.
Um, this seems really good in that it seems really good at you kind of are towing the line of, oh, do I commit to this location or not? And then the last second but it might be predictable after a while. Like people know this is in your deck. So maybe, I don't know how, in theory, this is good. The cost might be too predictable. But in theory, you're slightly behind on something and then your opponent doesn't know, are they going to commit to this location and make it better? Or are they going to, which location are they going to swap their power from and give up on, and which locations? So that threat would, I know it had a ton of like randomizing game theory behind, which one you do, so I mean this, because like you said, that like if you're, let's say someone has their location, they have 20 power and you have 5 power, for some reason they keep, well then trying to pass them up in 20 seems useless, but you could swap your 5 power to both other locations, and accept that loss and then win 2 out of 3. So I mean, strike seems very strong for that reason. But then there's the opportunity cost of you not doing anything else, right? Because
Yeah.
you're not. So I mean, I mean, I like the effect in theory. It looks too costly. So my guess is it's I think smart players probably get better at playing around it and thinking about it. So I think my guess is in practice it's not actually powerful. The more I think about it, but like I like the theory behind it, but it looks just too costly and too good players would know how to play around it. That's my guess.
Yeah, you nailed it. Crushed. Every like You can't see my face, but I was like throwing my hands up in like not like frustration, but like wow, he actually 100% got it, because the first bit you said is the only time he's really playable. He goes in and out of
Mhm.
decks because of the fear that he creates.
Mhm.
And so like if you're playing on ladder and your opponent doesn't know if you have this or like a different top end, it creates like a
Yeah.
really awkward situation. He's
Mhm.
used in some electro decks, he's used in some destroy decks, things like that, where your
Mhm.
goal is to create something big on turn 5 and then also create something big on turn 6. And so the point of the card in those decks is they don't know, or they have absolutely no way of knowing whether that thing you're going to do on turn 6 is 2 of the thing on 5 or something else big. And that's where he shines, exactly that mind game that you talked about. That
Mhm.
said, you are correct. Like this card has almost never been in the best deck in the game because of the exact dynamics you described. Like it is a big cost, especially if your
Yeah.
opponent can play around it and they know this is happening. It's a big cost. Like to use your entire final turn of the game on a
Yeah.
thing that does 0, especially if it gets like disrupted in some way, and there are cards that can disrupt it, it's very dangerous. It's a very high risk, high reward maneuver, and it tends not to see a ton of top level play. Sorry to the Zola
Okay.
fanatics out there. I know you exist.
Yeah. I mean, this is the kind of card the less it sees play, the better it is. Because
Yes.
but also if you have a reputation, if somebody's playing
Yep.
against you the same time, are you going to be putting this card in and out of your deck? Because if I know you 100% have it, then I can adjust accordingly. So it gives you the advantage as a random where somebody doesn't know you. But then sometimes people might play around these kind of cards anyways, just out of fear or something. So
Correct.
um, and all right, if you swapped 7 power on two things, you could have just had a 6-12, right? Like that was the Hulk or something
Yeah.
like that. So you might just be better off just playing a regular card because that's my theory on that anyway. So
That's
so
exactly correct. Like every single bit of the dynamics you said about this is the one you've gotten the most right, I think. Like you got the others, I've been like, that's perfect. This is like picture perfect description of the metagame dynamics of this card without ever having seen it before. That one is really impressive.
okay.
Destroyer, 615. On reveal, destroy your other cards.
At your location or in
No,
general?
all of them.
I mean, this seems like why would I not just play the Hulk? Like seems atrociously bad. Like I don't why am I
So
unless like I have a
I'll let
bunch of
you. Okay, continue.
yeah.
So
Unless
I'll
I
let you.
have all bad cards on my board for
Yeah.
some reason, which I don't know why I have all bad cards on my board that like of all -3s. Then I'm seeing them. It sounds like I'm losing anyways. If I play this, let's say I always win that location, but then I always lose the other two locations. So what's the point? I don't know. It
Yep.
seems really bad.
So I
And it's the
think for the most part you're right about this, which is to say this card at one point in Marvel Snap's history was actually so good that it received a nerf. It had one
uh-huh.
more point of power. And the context you're missing for understanding that, I realize that like you're likely missing context to understand why this card was ever even remotely playable at all, is that there are cards that can turn off the on reveal effect of any card. So like there's a card that's just like if you play a card here, it doesn't do an on reveal, right? And there's a
Hmm.
card that's like every card at this location cannot be destroyed. And there are a couple cards that do things along
Okay.
those lines, and so he'd be played in that context. But outside of that context, and pretty much once he received the nerf, this guy got really bad really fast. And
Okay.
he's been played. I think the last time this guy saw play in a realistic way was like basically there are a couple cards that tend to be played with him. They're cards that say, your stuff here can't be destroyed. And you would play those with this guy and build up some units, and then he would win another lane. That was like pretty much this is like the first ever
Okay.
Marvel Snap metagame deck that only targeted 2 lanes. Previously, almost every
Okay.
deck would like target 3, but like you would just play like your whole first like you'd skip turn 1, you go like 2, 3, 4, 5 in the same lane,
Uh,
and then you just like put him in another one, and that like that lane would be protected because of either your 2 or your 5
and
in that
you
context.
could pick which lane, either one,
Yeah.
like if you're doing all in two, you could pick one or three depending on what you're seeing your opponent's doing. So if they don't
Yeah.
have a lot of power on one, then they've given up on two, and then you use this to win the other one. I see. That makes
That's the
sense.
last time he was ever actually seriously good. He's also, I guess, a little more fringely used. Like, okay, you play Electro, and then you play this guy to blow up the Electro, and that removes the restriction of playing only one card per turn. But it's a lot worse than it sounds because you're still an Electro deck. You're built to only play one card per turn, so it doesn't actually do a ton in that context.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the most part, this guy's not very good. He's better
Okay.
than you thought he was, I think. Instead of being like a 0 out of 10, I would say he's like a 4 or a 5. But he's not
Yeah.
like overwhelmingly powerful because there are ways to turn him off to mitigate his downside. He's playable ish. Like playable minus is how I would describe
Yeah.
it. Like
Then
you
you have to,
can.
turn the downsides. That is an opportunity cost for having to play, because
Right.
you just -3 power to play the Hulk, right? So you don't
Yeah.
have to play the card to do that. So,
Yeah.
or
He
yeah.
used to be like the uncontested biggest thing. That is no
Mhm.
longer exactly true.
Okay.
This is Hazmat. 2/2 on reveal. All other cards get -1 power. And I'm going to clarify this because some of their wording is not super great. All other cards everywhere. Your cards, their
Um,
cards, not just the ones at this location.
but like in play,
In
not
play.
necessarily
Not in
not
deck, not in
necessarily
hand.
revealed, right?
Revealed,
So
yes. So actually, yes, it does. It revealed, yes. Like
well,
everything that's
so
face up.
as it, because you both reveal, but would it reveal the card, afflict the cards that your opponent plays this turn as well?
As long as they reveal before you. Marvel Snap has a mechanic where whoever's winning the game reveals their cards first.
Ooh,
And
okay.
it's called priority. It's not even called priority. There's no name for it. They didn't even give it a name. It's not like it's one of the things that makes Marvel Snap like kind of a deeper game because it's not like
Hmm.
a very focused on mechanic, but it's quite important. It's not particularly
Yeah.
important to this card though. The
Oh,
basically
okay.
if you're losing,
It's hard to be better when
you
you're losing, right?
right.
So,
Like that's how it works. Like if you're a little bit
um,
behind, this card it will be better. Also like the later you play it, the more stuff it hits. If you can multiply its power, things like that. Like we talked recently about multiplying the power. There is a card that multiplies your on
okay.
reveals. You can do that. Let's see. What other is there any other context I feel like you need to have for this? I think that actually pretty much covers it. Like that's the context you need
Yeah.
to understand this card, I think.
I mean, just the raw efficiency of this card. If I don't know if you want to be playing this on like turn five, or you want to play a 5 mana card, but if you play this on turn five, and let's say your opponent has 5 cards on the board, that's -5 power. So you have a net 7 power for 2 mana.
Well, it
That
hits your
seems
cards
incredible.
too. So if you have 5 cards on the
Oh,
board,
yeah, that's a good point. Okay. Um, so
I'll give
I
you some
forgot
more
about
context
that.
here, actually. Here's some
Uh,
more context. There is a
mhm.
card in the game that says that your cards can't get the negative power, but that's also
Okay.
a card your opponent could have. So there's your context.
Okay. This is tough because it afflicts yours, so you could build your way. I mean, if you do it in a way that the neutral stats are 2-3, or maybe so it also can have benefits of, like, if your opponent has a bunch of stuff on one spot. I mean, it seems a little awkward to use. I think the theory of it could be really strong, but I just hard for me to, like, imagine these really easy scenarios to use it. I don't know. But like, I mean, if your stuff can't get afflicted and not, and your opponent has 6 cards, I mean, the raw efficiency of this card is insane, right? Just so
The
I
two
don't know
eights
how
are
easy
two
that
eights
is
are
to
quite
do.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, so like but I don't know how much of, like, different locations, because
Right.
but I in the right context, the I think the efficiency of this card looks insane. So but I don't know how to make that context work. So I don't know how easy it is to make that context work. I don't know how so yeah, that's my
Yeah.
guess. So
Okay. Uh, you're right about the context, right? Like this is
mhm.
a card that can only work in a deck sort of specifically built to make it work. And for that
Hmm.
reason, it mostly doesn't work, right? Because of the effort you have to go into to make this card asymmetrical and to
Yeah.
make this card especially powerful. It's like, okay, you're going through all this effort for a 2/8. And you could be going through that,
Hmm.
like we've shown, you could be going through that effort for like much bigger stuff, is sort of
I
the
gotcha.
issue that this card has. Like, yes, you could go through that effort for a 2/8, and yes, a 2/8 that especially affects all the locations on the board, especially doing that is extremely valuable. But there are cards that can do similar stuff without the extreme level of investment that this requires. And it's really a question of
Hmm.
the investment here, because this card requires you to invest heavily in it. And even if you have your little combo, it's like a combo that doesn't win the game. It's just a combo that's like, oh, that's pretty good, right? And so that
Hmm.
is sort of her major issue. Like, she's very rarely a combo card that actually wins the game. You're like going through all this effort to build a combo deck, except your combo doesn't win the game. And that is sort
Yeah.
of her issue.
So maybe if you get like more cards that are kind of the similar effect, you could have like a in a future set, and she's still around. You could have like a redundancy that eventually makes it worth it. If you had just if you could just run three of her, something like that. I don't,
Yeah,
which
if
you
you could
obviously
run three of her, I think she'd be a lot better. Yeah.
yeah.
Like, if there were three
Well,
hazmats, that'd be pretty dangerous, actually. I think that would make
yeah.
like her counter cards like mandatory in every deck, though. If people were out here playing three of her, she would actually
Yeah.
become unplayable, I think, because there, like I said, there's a card that's like your cards can't get negative power, right? And so
Uh,
you just like everyone would just play that, and it would just be like, ah, well, my entire thing just dies.
that's what everyone thinks about. Well, when there's a powerful card, oh, people just tech against it, but it happens that it hurts when there's another deck that also is attacking against it, so it
Yeah.
kind of gets hit in the crossfire. But if it's the only one that's like that, there gets something like game theory equilibrium, right?
Yeah. So
But
I
but
will say, I'm gonna go show you the card that counters her real quick, just so you can
mhm.
understand what we're talking about here.
But it
Uh
counters it for your board too, right? So you'd run it into your deck too, right?
no, 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 yeah, you'd run it in your deck too. Yes, yes, yes. So this is the
Okay.
card that counters her. Your cards can't have their power reduced, and it's just like a really cheap and easy card to put in basically any deck.
Okay. Yeah.
And
So
so like the issue is not so much that like, oh, they'll just tech against it. It's like, oh, this tech is really splashable. You could just throw that in whatever. And that's the issue that like running three hazmats whatever would have, is that it's just like this card says your deck doesn't work now.
all
And
right.
it's pretty awkward. I would love for to run three hazmats, but like this card's just like, actually no, your deck no longer functions.
Then you just need another destroy Luke Cage tech card, and then you're good. So
Yeah, those kind of don't exist. That's what I'm
yeah.
saying. There's no like a
Yeah.
targeted removal for this guy. Like
Yeah.
you can only kill him if he's on the board, right? But because it's an ongoing ability, they can just play it on the final turn of the game and retroactively get rid of that stuff. So it's
Oh,
like
wait.
yeah.
Oh, that's how easy it is to beat it?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes. Like,
that's
so like that's
that's
that's the
annoying.
context here.
Okay.
It's very annoying. Yeah. So like
Okay.
that's like this is the main reason why hazmat decks like, probably not the main reason. They're pretty finicky to begin with. But this guy existing is why they could never be the best deck, because it's just like they
Okay.
as soon as they gain any modicum of popularity, they immediately get hated out of the metagame because it's very easy to splash this guy in and he's basically unbeatable.
Okay. Interesting.
There have been decks that use minus power as a mechanic, and they have been really good, but they have never involved hazmat ever.
Okay. So it seems like everything you've shown me so far, except for that -1/3, has been something that is was fringe useful. This, but I'm curious that when we run into now, I might be when we run into a really broken card, So
Yeah, I mean there are some really
um,
broken cards on here. Don't worry.
okay, okay,
This is
all right.
Loki. He's a 4/5. On reveal, replace your hand with cards from your opponent's starting deck. Give them -1 cost.
I mean, your opponent's my okay. So, your
It's Thief
your
Priest
hand becomes
or Thief
what?
Rogue. It's Thief Priest or
Yeah,
Thief
yeah.
Rogue. Yeah, yeah.
The -1 cost is really good, right? Because there's actually a benefit. Because usually, if it doesn't have that, it would probably be bad, right? Because your deck is designed in a way. Why would you want to take your opponent's cards? Um, but I don't know. This one's I don't know because it's like in general. I mean, you get more powerful cards, and you could probably, if your opponent has a bunch of, low cost stuff, you might be able to play like a 3-3 a 3-3-2 on turn 5. Uh, so I don't know, but do you draw a card per turn kind of thing? You start with 3, so you'd
Yeah,
have
you
more
start with
cards kind of
3.
thing.
I'll give you the context that there are cards that like put cards into your hand when you
Okay.
play them. Like the base one is like you get this card at the beginning of the game. It's called Sentinel. It's a 2/3.
Hmm.
And the game actually tells you like, hey, look, Sentinel is better than the Shocker, the 2/3, because when Sentinel is played, he puts another Sentinel in your hand. It's like 2/3 that gives you a 2/3,
Okay.
right? And
Okay.
that is so there are cards that can make it so you actually have more of a hand when you play this guy. I'll give you that context.
Okay. So I mean, I feel like if you have like 6 cards in your hand and your opponent has a low cost deck, um, I mean, if this card is just, I feel like if this card were just broken in general, people would go crazy. So I feel like it seems like a tech card against maybe certain kinds of decks, uh, like maybe low cost decks. I don't know. It's I could see the raw efficiency of it on like your turn 5 and turn 6 in theory being really good, but in practice sounds weird. Um, I don't know. It's I mean the -1 could be you play 3 cards, you get 8 mana worth of cards, but I'm also like it seems like the power scaling 1 5 mana card is better than a 3 mana card and a 2 mana card. Where in Hearthstone, at least currently, in my opinion, usually playing multiple low mana cards is better than one big mana card. Um, but it's not exactly asymmetrical. So hmm, it's tough. I don't know. I don't. I'm gonna go with like a mid power range. It's all right. I don't think it's broken.
Okay.
That's so yeah.
So when you said if this card was broken, everyone would go crazy. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
This card is broken and everyone is going crazy.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
This
Okay.
card has been the best card of the game since he came out, and it is
Okay.
like everyone is very mad about it. Like, that is
Okay.
exactly
Okay.
like, it's
Okay.
exactly correct. Yes, Thief Priest has been the best deck in Marvel Snap for like 3 months because of this guy.
Okay, okay.
So like
I
like
didn't. I
he
just
he
didn't think this card would be allowed to be that
no,
good. You know what I mean? It
yes,
was kind
I
of
know
like the
exactly
text. I
what
was
you
like,
mean. Yeah.
oh, the power removal, like that. That was my kind of thing. Yeah. Okay, that's
No,
funny.
that is exactly correct. He is and has been the best deck since he came out. I remember playing him for the first time because like I did the same evaluation when he first came out. I was like, I don't know, this guy looks fine. Like a 3 out of 5, whatever, sure. And then I played with him for like I don't know, it was probably like 20 minutes before I was like, oh man, this is actually sincerely messed up. And the reason it's messed up is because, Marvel Snap has energy restrictions, right? Like you only get
Mhm.
21 energy worth of cards every time you play
Yeah.
the game. And first of all, he came out as a 3/5, which is actually even funnier now that you look at him now. He was 1 energy less, which is
Yeah.
hysterical. And he's still the best card in the game, by the way. And so like
Okay.
restrict getting that -1 cost. The thing about that is all decks in Marvel Snap are a lot more similar in terms of their goals than they would be in
Mm.
Hearthstone. Like if you're
Oh,
an
okay.
aggro deck, getting a bunch of control warrior cards kind of sucks because they don't do
No.
what your deck does. But in Marvel Snap, nearly every deck, and there are obvious exceptions, but nearly every deck is built to put points on the board. You're putting points
Hmm.
on the board. You're doing it in different ways, but you're putting points on the board. And so when you play a Loki, you get to do what they're doing to put points on the board, but better. And that is the fundamental issue. Which is to like say nothing of the support cards that this guy has, which are like there's a card that gets +1 power every time a card gets added to your hand that's not from your deck. So obviously this guy makes him go berserk. Like there's just a bunch of stuff that came together, but fundamentally this guy is the problem. And he is like I would say he is likely the most hated card in Marvel Snap right now because of
Okay.
exactly like you said, like you like it's almost unbelievable that they were like, you know what, we should make the best deck in the game is Thief Priest. That thing everyone loves playing against. Everyone loves losing to their own
Yeah.
cards.
That's funny. It's funny just because the previous the removal card I thought was broken, and then you're like,
Mhm.
well, it's balanced around it like not being. So then I thought, oh,
Yeah,
I saw this card. It's like,
you
okay,
thought there's
well,
no way.
this card probably is balanced around two. It's probably not that
Yeah.
many. I don't know how the card draw works. It's probably not, with that turn 4, turn 5, 6. It's too
Yeah.
hard to get the efficiency. But no, it sounds like
No.
okay.
It's like utterly dominant. And like there are other decks you can play, but this guy has like I do a weekly tier list type thing, and this deck has been at the top of that weekly tier list basically since it came out. And it's been nerfed
Okay.
multiple times, all of that. It's a big problem. It is
Okay.
probably the dominant card in Marvel Snap. And I think the interesting thing about it though, if you don't mind me getting too into the weeds here,
Hmm.
this guy scales with play skill in a really dramatic way. Like at lower levels of play, he's not actually like noticeably broken when you look at the numbers. But then when you
Hmm.
get into like the top 100, the people who know what every deck in the game is doing and is trying to do,
Ah,
he gets much, much better, which makes him very hard to balance because Marvel Snap wants to be balanced for the 99%. But this card gets so
yeah.
broken when you actually understand what every deck in the game is trying to do and when you need to play it and how you need to approach each deck and play them. And so like that is what he scales with, and that makes him very tough to balance. So I will give them some credit on that as to why he's been so tough to
Okay.
balance.
Yeah, so I mean, and it might be a thing of, maybe the top 100 players complain about it, but
Correct.
if a card is adding to the overall skill cap of the game, but it just limits the other options, it still might be an actual win for the players because it allows players to outplay each other uh, and have more agency in the game. Where so
He
you
is the
know
highest agency card that they've ever made, I think. Honest to
yeah,
God, I think he
so
is.
I mean it doesn't necessarily seem like bad design, but yeah, it is kind of funny that if it's like that, yes, it just
Yeah.
yeah, so
You couldn't have
interesting.
done
Yeah.
better. Like if I'd planned
Okay.
this, you couldn't have said anything funnier. Like
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
that
Yeah.
is peak. Next up is Shadow King. And I'm gonna give you a little bit more context here because I think looking at this card, it's hard to understand what he does exactly. Set all cards here to their original base power. Their like base power in Marvel Snap means like there are cards that are like miracle type cards, right? Like Miracle Rogue type cards where it's like Edwin Van Cleef type. If someone were to
Mm,
play an Edwin Van Cleef, this guy would make Edwin Van Cleef a 2/2 again. Like he would take away all
okay.
those green stats and he would make him a 2/2 again. That is what he does. That
Okay.
is the role that this guy plays. So that's the best analogy I can give you is like if you're playing a card that like gains power by doing a thing, he will get rid of the power you gained by doing a thing.
Okay. Um, so I mean, I don't know how prevalent that stuff. I know you said the vanilla stats of the other card was a 2/3, so it seems. But I mean, you probably don't want to play this on two though, realistically, as much because there's just less things to lower to the base stats. Guessing turn one, so it'd be a card you want to play on like turn 4 or 5. Do you want to be playing that on turn 4 or 5? I don't really know. But I mean, it sounds like a tech card against a meta where there's really big buff stuff up. Maybe a scaling one card that gets to turn 5, and you want to power it down or something like that. Um, but I mean, that's hard for me to think. I mean, this seems like a tech card that basically and it's not bad statted, so it's like it doesn't have to be that prevalent, but it doesn't seem something you'd uh that's my guess. So if it's a
Okay.
dominant deck, you put it in. So
That is correct. You're missing like the specific context of right now is those green stat cards are the dominant threats in the game. So he is very good
okay,
right now, but he's also been very
okay,
bad in the past.
okay,
He was released at a much higher cost. They eventually got him down to 2. And costing 2 in Marvel Snap is like just very, very powerful because you can mix it in later in the game. You are correct. You're never
yeah,
playing him on 2, but like being able to just like play a 2 and then like a powerful 4 on the final turn of the game is pretty good, especially if the 2 ends up doing a lot of damage to your opponent by like turning their 10 into a 2 or whatever, because all the 10 comes from the like green stats, the bonus stats. Like if they played an Edwin or whatever, give this basically a removal spell for
Yeah.
the Edwin equivalent, right? And that the current dominant decks in Marvel Snap use a lot of, and I'm going to use this analogy again, they use a lot of Edwin type stuff. They're Edwin-y
Okay.
type threats. And so this card is the removal spell du jour for that type of deck. In as much as removal spells exist in Marvel Snap, this is kind of what they look like. Like they are
Okay.
cards with on reveal effects that stop your opponent from doing things, destroy stuff.
Yeah.
There is a removal card that does that, but it's not the only way to interact with your opponent's power. And this is in a metagame where there's a lot of green power running around, a lot of cards that have stats above their base. This is the card
Yeah.
that stops them in their tracks.
It seems to me if you just play it on turn 6, now like you just all those effects go away,
Yeah.
and you can know if you're going to play it or not. So
Yep.
you can adjust, how much you invest in other spots accordingly. So I mean, it seems like it would nullify those effects because you can. It's not like in Hearthstone where, if I have a really overpowered card for 4 turns, I'm doing tons of damage,
Yeah.
where it's only at the end of the game, it sounds like,
Correct.
that them stuff matters. So you can just wait all game to play this. Um,
Exactly.
and so, yeah, that seems pretty good in that context. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like you don't get to like if you have like a big guy, that big guy only matters at the end of the game. That's the only time it matters. That's when points are counted, right? It doesn't matter
Okay.
before then, unless there are like there are locations that say like you can't play here after turn 4 or whatever. And in that case, having a really
Mhm.
early big guy is awesome. But for the
Okay.
most part, yeah, the game ends when the game ends. That's when points are counted. Your big guy isn't snowballing you; it's just a big guy, and then it
Okay.
becomes a very small guy.
I gotcha.
Next up, Taskmaster. 5-0, but on reveal, this card's power gets set equal to the last card you played.
This card seems terrible. Like, why would a 4 mana card be equal? Um, unless
Well, you don't
like,
have to play
I
him on
guess,
4, or you don't have to play him on 5.
yeah. Well, you could play them on 6, so you could do it on a 5 mana card.
That's
So I mean,
usually,
so
yeah,
you'd have to have some sort of card that's kind of like a 5 mana 20 that says like something really bad on its card text, and then you steal that 5/20. But even that, like, okay, you have to play these two giant clunky things. I don't know. Like, it seems, and your, I don't know, opponent, if they know you're running a Taskmaster deck, could in theory, I know there's not much removal, so could do something to lower it. I don't know. It seems really clunky and hard to use. That's my guess. I mean, and you
so
could only, yeah.
yeah, it is really clunky and hard to use. That said, the giant 520 that says something really bad, that is actually exactly the use case. there
Okay,
is
yeah.
there like you were so close on that. That's actually incredible. So there's like a 4 that doubles power, and then there's like a 5 that has big numbers on it with a big downside. And so you do the
Uh-huh.
4 that doubles power on the 5 with the big downside, and then you copy it with the Taskmaster, and it's just like a 30. And like
Okay.
that is like the thing about Marvel Snap is even stuff that's clunky, if the numbers it makes are big enough, can be absolutely extremely powerful. Like if the numbers
Okay.
you're making are big enough, it doesn't even really matter how clunky your deck is because you know if you're making the big numbers and they don't. Now I will say
Hmm.
that deck we're talking about here, it keys off of how beatable the 4 into the 5 is. Because the 4 into the 5, like I said, the 5 has a pretty big downside. So if your opponent can win
Mhm.
the lane the 5 is in, because you're only really targeting 2 lanes, that clunkiness you identified, you end up in a situation where if they can win the lane the 5 that this is copying is in, or if they can kill the 5 or get rid of it or reduce its power in some way, you end up in a very, very awkward situation that is very, very clunky. So, clunky deck. I will say though, this card has been in the best deck in the game before, because that deck before it got
Okay.
nerfed used to be, I would say probably 7 or 8 months ago, the best deck in the game.
Okay.
Back before a couple of the cards in it got nerfed, this was not one of them, but there is the context to just make this guy a 530 or a 528
Okay.
most of the time.
Hmm.
And that is just like, it doesn't matter how clunky it is when you're making a 528. We saw like the normal thing's like a
Okay.
5.9. If you can make a 528, that's really, really good.
Yeah, it makes sense. So, yeah, I think I'm used to Hearthstone where you play if you play a 7/7 like man play a four a
A
six
4 mana
mana
7/7? A four, they made a 4 mana
yeah
7/7?
yeah, it's not even that good.
That's
It's like
crazy.
well, it's so and then you just somebody goes, light that burns for
Yeah.
1 mana, or
Yeah.
insert one of the 80 single target removal cards that every class has. So
Yeah.
um clunky. Yeah, but I could see with the removal not being as good in Marvel Snap,
Yes.
but still like the setup sounds like a lot
It
for
is
this
kind of a
card, and it's
lot.
so I mean it sounds like this card is very tied to there's a broken thing that you can double the effect of, so
Yes,
yeah.
that is exactly what it's tied to. It is only ever played. There are two decks that play cards that double stuff. Sorry, I almost ruined my own YouTube rating there. I almost said something other than stuff. No,
Yeah.
there are two cards that in that this deck. There are two decks that play cards that have like the double in their text, and both of them play Taskmaster.
Okay.
This is Death. She costs 8, which means in a
Hmm.
normal game of Marvel Snap, she is unplayable. But she
Hmm.
reduces her own cost for each card destroyed this game. And she is quite large, 12, very big.
I mean, this sounds like so I don't, you only show me that one other card, but like let's say there's a big board of tokens and you play that 5 mana card and you destroy some of your own stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
This could often be 0 mana. You drop it on turn 6. I bet there's ways to get this to 0 mana without too much difficulty. That is my guess. And then you would drop it on turn 6 wherever you need to. This card looks insane. Like that's my guess.
Solid.
Like looks
It's a
absolutely
little,
insane. But yeah.
yeah, it's a little less insane than you think because like there are ways
Okay.
to do that, but they are harder than you think, I think. Like it's
Okay.
not, she's not zero most of the time. Like she is like usually somewhere in like the 3 to 4 range, which is still
Okay.
really good. But if you could consistently get her to zero, like killing 8 things over the course of what would be 5 turns is very hard to do. She's rarely going to end up being zero, but she's just really big and really undercosted. I wouldn't say she's insane. She's like a card that only goes in that archetype, but that
Okay.
archetype is like she is a staple in that archetype. That's how I would describe her. Like she is just like if you are playing that kind of deck, you are playing this card. If you are blowing your own stuff up,
Yeah.
this is one of the reasons why you're blowing your own stuff up. This is the payoff for that archetype, and that archetype is quite good right now. Probably not
Hmm.
like the best deck, but among the ones that I could reasonably recommend that you play. And she's a pretty decently sized part of that. She's not like the biggest payoff. There's actually another destroy payoff that's even bigger than her. But for
Hmm.
the most part,
You could run both though, right? So
correct. You run both. And for the
yeah.
record, the destroy deck is one of the decks that does play Taskmaster. So like there are worlds where you
Okay.
get her to 1 and then you go like her plus a Taskmaster
Oh
kind of
yeah,
thing. That's
that
the
makes
kind of
sense.
thing
Yeah.
that this deck can try to do some of the time. It is one of the decks that has a card in it that doubles. So like she is not
Okay.
always the biggest thing you can be doing, but in some of the games
Hmm.
she is, and that makes her worth running.
Okay. Cool. So yeah, I mean, and then I don't know how rotation happens in Marble Snap or if cards are just permanent. But I know in the future, if they print something that does make cards easy, like a lot more cards destroyed, metagames
Yeah.
change, the way games play, all of a sudden this card could become broken overnight if tokens and destroy effects are everywhere. I mean,
Yes.
I'm sure they're going to be careful and think about that, but these things happen. So, you know,
So here, hold on.
they're
I got one for you. So like, yes, they
okay.
are going to be careful and think about that. Yeah, sure. But this card was actually broken in almost exactly the way you describe
Hmm.
in a previous metagame. And that metagame was when there was a card that set all costs to 4, and that
Hmm.
would include her. So what would happen is all costs would be set
Oh,
to 4, and then she would only need to be discounted a little bit. And so
yeah,
like you discount if everything costs 4, you get to play her plus something else, and they only get to
yeah,
play one thing, and it's like, "Oh my god, that's really really overpowered." So they changed the other card so that it doesn't work that way anymore. But that is one of the oldest archetypes in the game. Like back in the beta,
yeah.
that is one of the things that you could do with her. So like, yes,
Right.
she has been super broken before. She currently is not because they are very careful with her.
Yeah, you know what they say in Jurassic Park, right? Like mana cheating finds a way. So it's like something that says cost one less, it's only a matter of time before something else breaks it. So yeah.
That tends to be like how mana cheating definitely does find a way when it comes to Marvel Snap. Like mana cheating found a way with Loki. It found a way with several other cards. Mana cheating does find a way. Okay, here's the final card.
Okay.
Eliath. 6 cost, 3 power. On reveal, destroy all enemy cards played here this turn, whether they've been revealed or not. Just boom, they go away.
Mm. But so it's only cards played this turn, so you have to like, I guess the way you play this is you kind of secures your win on a spot where
Yeah.
your head and your opponent, you play this and you're pretty much, or even if you're, what's amazing about it, if you're behind by 2 and you play this,
Yes.
uh,
Yes.
then they play something, it kind of, but if your opponent knows you're gonna play this, that kind of can makes it a really interesting dynamic of like what they do. If they have a 6 minute, but it's there'd be a lot of game theory of like, okay, which board you play, because it's gonna be very predictable. You run this card, like if someone knows you're running this deck, that somehow uses this card, so they can diversify their play. Uh, um, I mean, it's also a thing of like, how do you have enough tempo that you can afford to do something like this? So, like, how can you afford to just go on finishing off your opponent? Like if you're ahead, this is a stay ahead, but if you're head on one, how do you know the other one? Like if you have two that it's on the margin and you're head on one, how do you guess which one they're going to put stuff on? Having your last card on like a 50-50 chance seems bad. Um, so I see the game theory of this card. In practice, it's hard for me to think it's actually going to be good. It's going to be too hard to use and too hard to predict um, for that mana. So um, that's my guess. But yeah.
This is a very strong card, actually.
Okay.
It's quite strong. It is it's one of the best 6 cost cards in the game. And
Okay.
it is because of that door slamming mechanic that you identified. The door sort of
Okay.
gets slammed again, even if you're -2, even if whatever. If you've locked up another lane beyond all possible contestation, which you can do, right? Like this is one of the situations
Okay.
where tempo actually is a real concept in Marvel Snap. In most cases, you have your big guy and it's just a big guy, but this
Yeah.
guy leverages the big guys that you play
Yeah.
into you can't win this lane, and then this card wins the other lane. That's sort
I
of how this
gotcha.
guy works. He goes in like these sort of lockdown control type decks. I would say on balance, maybe behind Loki, this is probably the most hated card in Marvel Snap. Like,
Seems like it'd be really hard to use because you have to be okay. I have to be so ahead in one lane that my opponent can't come back, but I
yeah,
have this other lane that because if your opponent just ahead on power level, because you have to use all your mana for a turn. So if they
correct.
have 16 power and you have 12 power in that lane, you can't pass them
You
up. So you
can't.
have to be
Correct.
head on two. You have to be ahead on 2 lanes, and one you have to be massively ahead. One you have
Yep.
to be just minorly ahead.
Correct.
That situation it seems good. That seems like a I don't know why that situation be coming up a lot. It seems like it'd be a lot more
Because you build
back
your
to
deck
back.
to make that situation come up a lot. There are cards
Okay.
that like end lanes early, right? Like a card that's like this is the last turn anyone can play here, right? Or a
Oh,
card
okay.
that's like no one can play here after this, right? And so he is very often paired with them. And it's like, all right, we locked up one lane. We're kind of close in this one. As long as we're close enough, we're going to slam him down. But the other thing
Okay.
is that it is actually weirdly a situation that does come up a lot because like
Okay.
there are some like really strong, say, 4 power cards that it's like, okay, they put that there, and it's like, do I even want to contest that lane? Do I even
Okay.
want to bother trying, or do I want to try to win the other two? And like that is actually like one of the core decision points you have in a lot of games of Marvel Snap is like, where
Mhm.
am I investing my power? Are these
Yeah.
lanes winnable? How do I win 2 out of 3? And he just deletes that choice. That's kind
Okay.
of the thing that he does. Like you're correct that like I actually do think he's a little bit weaker than he gets credit for. Like, because like all the downsides you mentioned are super real, but there are a lot of
Mhm.
situations where like your opponent's winning play is play a card on lane X and abandon lane Y. And if you can
Mhm.
identify those situations, just like, oh, the game's actually over with no issues whatsoever, just done.
Okay.
He's a card that makes the game end. And in Marvel Snap, there's a lot of final turn question marks. Like, what happens if X? What happens if Y? And this guy gets rid of so many of those that I think that's why he's
Yeah.
hated as much as he is. He's hated
Okay.
more than he is strong, but he is also pretty good. That is how I would recommend it.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like if luck happens where it's a good way to leverage tempo advantage for a win.
Yes.
Where so especially if you have, I guess if you have this card and another 6 mana card, or another 6 mana good play that you have, so you can use this when you're ahead, but when you're behind, you have a more risky
Yeah.
kind of
He's often paired
play
with
for
Doctor
behind.
Doom. That is exactly correct. He is often paired with Doctor
Okay.
Doom, who is a 6/5 that puts fives on every spot. So you have to play
Okay.
around this guy blowing up your stuff or 15 power spread around the board. And like
Okay.
that mind game is extremely powerful.
Yeah, that's interesting. So okay, so yeah, I see it. Yeah, but it's hard for me to know like that circumstance
Oh
because
yeah.
it's I could see it being like why are you always in the situation where you're just slightly ahead? If you have a deck that is always slightly ahead,
Yes.
how did you get that's it's a
The
slightly ahead
decks
that's
that
really
this
good,
guy
right?
goes
So
in, yeah, though like there are whole archetypes that are just like my deck is getting slightly ahead and playing this guy. Like
okay.
that is like a whole strategy. It's actually like a really interesting sort of inversion of how you think Marvel Snap is supposed to go. Because when you think how
Hmm.
about Marvel Snap as a game, it's a game where having the most explosive, surprising turn six is the most valuable because that's how you maximize the cubes, right? Like that you don't
Mm,
want your opponent to know how strong you are for as long as you can possibly do that. And this card
okay.
exists to punish people who do that. If you want to hide your power and you want to be
Ah,
behind, I play this and it doesn't matter. You don't have that power anymore. And
you've been holding
that's
overpowered card in your hand somehow that you have synergy with,
right.
because you want to for the cube or something like that. Okay.
You want to like save your Edwin until turn six or whatever. And there is a card in this game that
Mhm.
is almost exactly Edwin Van Cleef.
Okay.
So it's like you save your Edwin until turn six, and it's like actually no, it doesn't happen. It gets blown up. It dies. It never even shows up on the board. Goodbye. And so
Mm,
like that is the a lot of how like what this guy does, and that's a lot of why he isn't liked because that kind of play style, like that's the control stuff that like people
okay.
do not like. This is the kind of deck I was going to recommend to you. Like you want to
Okay.
feel
Okay.
like
Okay.
you have that power. You want to feel it like you're going to feel like they have no chance and they don't even know it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's what this guy does. That's
That
his
does sound fun. Yeah.
yeah, that's his raison d'etre. I don't know how to pronounce that in French. I'm sorry. All right. So that's it. No hands.
All
What
right.
did you think? What are your thoughts coming out of this?
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of like, I mean, probably when you play it enough, like the game theory gets figured out just through this, but there's a lot of weird, meta like game theory and metagame. Kind of maybe the Hearthstone metagame is just like, well, certain archetypes. And I guess there's that too, but there's like, okay, I know my opponent runs both these cards, and I have to have this card that
Yeah.
works statistically. A lot of interesting kind of uh, balancing plays. I played poker semi-professionally when I was younger too, where you have to like, okay, you do this 20% of the time and this 80% of the time. So it sounds like there's a lot of that stuff where it's like, okay,
Yes, absolutely.
if I, but that's interesting when you're up against an unknown versus, if you're up against someone if
Exactly.
oh, they always play Alioth, they have to actually do the other play sometimes.
Yes.
So where if you're up against an unknown, you can guess based off and then it also is always weird if you're a streamer, you probably have a reputation. Somebody can know like, oh, I've
Sure
watched them.
do.
They always play Alioth, so that can throw you off too. That's
Yes,
kind
there's
of
a lot of those leveled plays where it's like, all right, I know that they know that I want to do this, so I have to do this other thing, but they might know that I know that they know. There's a lot of that. Yes, like that's
yeah.
a lot of Marvel Snap turn sixes. And I think that's actually an effect that this card specifically has brought into the game, where it's like, do you play around this card or do you play around literally anything else?
Yeah.
Like that is definitely one of the things that like does the like I think people end up not liking too much about it. Do your shout outs to yourself. Tell everyone where they can find you.
Oh, I'm No Hands Gamer on Twitch and YouTube in the Hearthstone world. So if you're going over the other game,
Yeah.
I'm on there. So I stream in the evenings of like sort of US time. So if you just click on Hearthstone, you'll probably see me in the most evenings on the Twitch category. So yeah, but you can see I kind of generally.
Don't
You
understand it.
know,
You crushed this. You
I
did
get lots of
so
things
good.
wrong too. Yeah, yeah.
You did
So
so good. Like even your wrong ones were like only wrong because of missing context. Like I need to make these harder because you're like the third person. I need to get dumber guests. Like, that's actually what I need to do. I
yeah,
need to
yeah.
get guests.
I'm not gonna be very. Well, I bet people like the Loki one because everyone will like seeing
That one,
see all
people are gonna
the
go nuts for
situations
that one.
because I just know people hate those kind of cards. So I just was
Yes.
like, there's no,
There's no way. How
there's
could they
no.
ever let that be good?
But yeah, I mean those cards are usually terrible in Hearthstone,
Yeah.
and then people complain about them anyways, and I'm always like, they're terrible. Who cares? Let the person have their 45% win rate Thief Priest deck. So yeah,
No, that's why I
but
put it on there because like those cards are so terrible in Hearthstone. I was like, there's no way he'll get this. Like, there's no
yeah,
way.
so
There's no chance that he'll be like, yeah, that's the best card in the game.
I mean I
That's
saw the efficiency of it, but I guess
no,
I
you
think I was
you
thinking
you were
yeah
closer to it than I thought you would be. I'll be honest with you because I'm so used to looking at like cards like thief stuff and just be like, well, that's god awful. That's the worst thing ever. I thought I would get you with that, and then you were like, well, that -1 though. My heart stopped
yeah.
a little bit.
Mana cheating finds a way, it's like it's you can't stop it. There's gonna be a mana cheating card, It's people, cards that do really powerful things in really fringe situations. They might be bad, 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 and all of a sudden fringe situation shows up, and then all of a sudden they break the game. So you
Yep.
gotta always kind of like be thinking about them, So
Absolutely. No hands, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
thank you,
This
KMB.
is
It was fun. Yeah, maybe if I
Yo,
don't
hold
play this,
on. Hold
yeah.
on. I'm about to expose you. It's KM Best.
Oh, I keep saying KM Beast. I
No,
saw
I
that.
know
Yeah,
you said that in the Twitter DM when I asked about this. I was like, I shouldn't correct him. It'll be fine. I was
yeah.
just like, okay, he didn't say it the whole time. I'm leaving this in. I'm exposing.
Yeah.
No, you are
I think
not
it
the
just like you had a Beast vibe, Like there's also the Beast
happens
in
all the
Double
time.
Snap.
No, this
So
literally
yeah.
happens all the time. People are like, "Oh, it's KM Beast," because I act like an idiot. So of course I'm the kind of guy who would call myself that. No, 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 it's not. Oh my god.
Yeah.
No, no,
Yeah,
no.
maybe you'll eventually rebrand to KM
I'll
Beast.
rebrand to KM Beast. Yeah, it'll be great.
There's the Beast as a Marvel character, right?
Yeah, he
Is
actually.
it
I should
a
have put him on the
Beast?
list. Yeah. Oh, I should have
Yeah.
asked
Oh
you to
yeah.
rate
So yeah,
Beast.
he's the blue guy. So
He's the blue guy. Yeah.
yeah. So
I'm Blue Kelsey
yeah.
Grammer. I'm
Yeah. So
Blue Fraser.